Welcome to this online gathering of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Little Rock. I'm Rebecca Retzel. I'm a member of the church and currently serving as the worship chair. I am glad to be with you this morning. Whoever you are, wherever you are, we are glad that you have joined us. This month, we are exploring a series entitled Voices Past Through Voices Present. A series in which current members read content from UUCLR services from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Not only does this provide some historical context about our church as we celebrate the 70th anniversary, but it also challenges us to listen with discerning ears, minds, and hearts. Throughout this series, I will be encouraging you to consider the following. If you did not know that the message was from the archives, would you think it to be a contemporary message? Does content from 60 years ago still carry meaning for us today? What themes of being a UU, for better or worse, still run steady through our veins? Reflect upon how far we've come and how far we have yet to go. Today's message and the accompanying reading were delivered by Reverend Richard Kelley in September of 1962. Reverend Kelley served the Unitarian Fellowship of Little Rock from 1959 to 1967. Jim and Ruth Bell, some of our current members, moved to Little Rock in 1960 and shared a few of their memories. Jim recalls that his sermons were always interesting and many were controversial. Ruth remembers that every sermon was a fresh, new sermon based on his thoughts and reading. He did not have a pile of old sermons to fall back on when new sermons were hard to write. Most especially, Ruth shares, quote, "I recall the sermon that followed the death of JFK. Before the sermon, I was sad and disheartened. After the sermon, I left the service with hope and resolve." Mark Arrow, many of you will know, who moved away in the past decade, recently shared these words about Reverend Kelley. Quote, "My parents joined the church in 1958 or 9 when I was only about 5 years old. The services were being conducted in the VFW hall on Wolf Street. I was too young to appreciate Rick, but I do remember that he caught some flack when he married a, quote, divorced woman, as if that was going to change this wonderful man. He was cautioned by a few members that they were glad he didn't have a beard, that being way over the top for conservative Little Rock. Shortly after he was hired," Mark continues, "Reverend Kelley began growing a big, bushy beard. He was a wonderful man and a great role model for the period." Thank you to Jim and Ruth and Mark for these sharings. And please note that while none of the words have been changed, today's sermon has been edited in the interest of time. If you would like to receive a copy of Reverend Kelley's message in its entirety, please be in contact with me or send a note to our church office. We would be happy to share it with you via email. We move now into a spirit of worship with today's opening words and the lighting of our chalice, a symbol of our liberal faith. These are the words from the processional hymn of Reverend Kelley's installation service on January 26th, 1960. Not in vain the distance beckons. Forward, forward let us range. Let the great world spin forever down the ringing grooves of change. Through the shadow of the globe we sweep ahead to heights sublime. We, the heirs of all the ages, in the foremost files of time.
Hello, I'm Jerry Blackburn, and Rebecca's asked me to share a few of my memories of our church from the 1960s. I first heard about and started attending our church occasionally when I was a senior at Hendrix College around the spring of 1960. At that time it was called the Unitarian Fellowship of Little Rock. That was about a year before the Unitarian and Universalist denominations merged in 1961, and it was about that time that our name was changed to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Little Rock, which we still use today. I graduated from Hendrix in January of 1961, went to work for the Boy Scouts in Little Rock, became active in the church, and signed our membership book that fall. In 1961, we were meeting in rented space in an American Legion Hall at 24th and Wolf Street, not far from the state fairgrounds. Here's a photo of the Legion Hall and our minister at the time, Reverend Rick Kelley. Rick was a good minister and was known for his excellent sermons. Here's a picture of the meeting room where we held our worship services and discussion groups. And another photo of one of our religious education classes. Rebecca asked me to say something about the church's reputation in the community at the time. I don't know about the whole community, but here's an example of just one person's perception of us. One day our Boy Scout office secretary asked what church I went to. When I told her the Unitarian Fellowship, her immediate response was, "Why, that's that communist church, isn't it?" That was probably because our Unitarian Fellowship had openly supported school integration and the reopening of the closed Little Rock schools back in the late 1950s. In the McCarthy and Faubus years, the words liberal and communist were almost synonymous. One of my favorite memories is of our very active young adult group. We had a lot of fun activities like taking a trip to Memphis or going down to Hope to dig for diamonds. We were a close-knit group, and some of us remained close friends for almost 60 years. We used to meet on Sunday nights in group members' apartments or houses for dinner and great discussions. One night we were almost arrested for inviting some black Central High School students to meet with us in a house in an all-white neighborhood. While we were discussing their experiences at Central High School, someone noticed red lights flashing on the front window curtains. We went to the front door, and out front was a crowd of neighbors and policemen and some police cars, which in those days had red rotating lights on the top. They were going to arrest us for, quote, disturbing the peace unless we broke up our meeting, which we finally agreed to do. I've thought many times since then that we probably should have stood our ground and gone to jail, but we didn't. By 1963, as I recall, the American Legion Post was close to paying off its mortgage, and we thought that when that happened, they would probably no longer rent space to us. So we started looking for property to build a church on and found some on Reservoir Road. At that time, Reservoir Road was way out in the country and still a gravel road, and this old map X marks our location. One Sunday night, a member named Nelson Foley drove several of us in his Volvo out to see the property during or following a rainstorm. The road was so muddy and rutted in places that I was sure we were going to get stuck, but fortunately we didn't. Fundraising for the new church buildings began in earnest and under the leadership of John Howard. Here are some photos from the fundraising campaign led by John. Notice the large number of children in one of the pictures entitled "Help Put a Roof Over Our Heads." I think I counted over 50 children in that photo. In 1963, I took a job in New York and married Selma and lived on the East Coast for about 5 years before returning to Little Rock in 1968. So I wasn't here during the actual construction of our new buildings, but I do have some photos provided by John Howard and others. Here's a photo of the groundbreaking ceremony. From left to right are Reverend Kelley, Katie Tobin's husband, Gene Tobin, for whom part of the North Little Rock VA Hospital is named, and Nancy Kimple's father, Mac Lyons. The two men on the right, I think, were the architect and the contractor, but I don't know their names. Here are a couple of architects' drawings for the new church. Notice the sanctuary entrance from the parking lot on the east. The pulpit and chancel were on the west side of the sanctuary near the present pillar with the thermostat. The sanctuary had a hard surface floor and was an all-purpose room used for many activities like folk dancing, parties, and dinners. The chancel was constructed of wedge-shaped portable sections that could be set up in various configurations for worship services, plays, and other activities. The sanctuary was not air-conditioned until our expansion and renovation in 1987, and in hot weather we sometimes took chairs outside and had forum discussions under the trees. There was no roof over the walkway between the sanctuary and the RE building, but that's where we had outdoor coffee hour when the weather was nice, especially in the spring and the fall. The present Pearson room had accordion doors and served as two classrooms or as our fellowship hall as needed. The kitchen was in what is now the Emerson room, accessible to both the outdoor walkway and the Pearson room for coffee hour, depending on the weather. The minister's office was in the northeast corner of the RE building, or the north end of our present nursery. The administrator and RE director shared an office in the southeast corner, or south end of our present nursery. Downstairs there were classrooms for kindergarten, several grades, and junior high. When Selma and I moved with our daughters from Boston to Little Rock in 1968, we joined UUCLR and quickly became friends with several other young couples with children. Here's a photo from an Easter egg hunt in 1969. Notice that we were still out in the country with almost no other buildings around us on Reservoir Road. The last 1960s memory I'll share is the big puppet show fundraiser we held in December of 1969. It was coordinated by Charlotte Wallace, who also made most of the puppet theater and the puppets. Here are just a few photos from that event. So those are just a few of my memories of our church from the 1960s. Selma and I have made many wonderful friends here over the years. Without this church, we probably would not have moved to Little Rock in 1968, and it has added greatly to the quality of our lives in all the decades since then.
Faith in the midst of life. Faith is not something we start with, but something at which we arrive. We find it in the midst of life, life in the moving and vital sense. We give ourselves, we send out our restless minds, and so discover truth. We use our hands and learn creative skills. We pray and find our spirits quickened and renewed. We risk ourselves, and courage rises up to brace our souls. We give ourselves unselfishly and so lay hold on love. We lose ourselves, and then we find ourselves. Assurances are inns where we renew our hope, regain our strength, and are refreshed. But inns are by the side of roads. The one has no meaning without references to the other. There is always faith ahead of us that we have not yet realized. It is born when we move into life, take up its tasks, when we accept its sufferings, live simply and earnestly the highest we know. Years go into its maturing. No transaction is without its tidings, without its intimation of greater life. Every hour holds some deepening affirmation, some correcting discipline, some fresh surprises. Religion is a history of enterprise, to learn life's fullness, a long procession of men toiled up great and unknown mountains, events coming and going like day and night. Men in motion through storms and tragedies and defeats, but ever going on. And all along the way, discoveries and revelations coming in, ever pouring in to fill us. Faith is not something we start with, but something at which we arrive. We find it in the midst of life along the way. Raymond J. Vaughn.
Hi everyone, I'm Liz McKenzie and I've been a church member since 2004 and I'm reading the sermon. Our contemporary world is one of shattered glass. This may be good or bad depending upon one's view, but shattered it most certainly is. Some of our oldest, most cherished beliefs have been shattered. Beliefs about the ways of the world, about the nature of man, and in some instances about the nature of our own personal lives. Old traditional views on economics and politics have been shattered, or at least badly chipped on the stony ground of hunger and hatred, of revolution and upheaval around the world. Long-held views of what is right and wrong in human conduct, of what is of ultimate importance and significance in life. In many quarters, these have broken up and vanished from the concerns of men. An accompanying phenomena has been the shattering and fragmenting of authority. Time was, a few decades ago, when there were just a few simple authorities who satisfied most men. God, the President of the United States, the family doctor, Emily Post, and a couple of others. These suffice to handle most important decisions. A quick consultation with any 1, 2, or 3 such sources of authority easily settled most practical questions of living. Those easy, simple days are gone, perhaps forever. Not that authority has hereby vanished from the lives of men. Oh no. It has simply multiplied like rabbits into 1,000 different conflicting authorities. The newspaper, radio, and television all shower us with every imaginable type of authority. From the vendors of advice to the lovelorn and the chronically ill, to the dignified and glib news commentators with their authoritative interpretations of every possible field of existence. With the advent of the public opinion poll, almost anyone may now draw on what most awesome of all contemporary authorities, the voice of the people, to justify virtually any opinion or action he chooses. I understand that in some quarters, the public opinion poll has been refined into such a delicate instrument that certain public officials can determine the voice of the people by polling only 5 or 6 individuals. What is even more wonderful is they can actually convince the rest of the populace that it's true. As our society increases in complexity, as our problems multiply, so too the number of individuals, of groups and institutions which lay claim to at least partial authority in some areas. These likewise increase. Within the field of religion, there has also been a process of fragmentation of authority taken place. Traditionally, two sources of authority have predominated within Western religion. The first is, of course, the Holy Bible and all contained therein, from the source of final, absolute authority for vast numbers of religious groups in the Western world. Dr. Grady Wilson, who for a time at least was the lead man for the evangelist Billy Graham, once said of Graham's evangelical approach, quote, "Graham will preface a statement with, 'The Bible says,' as many as 100 times. He's not just telling what you might call tear-jerking illustrations, but is primarily emphasizing the Holy Scripture." Naturally, this is exactly what Billy Graham should be doing, emphasizing the Holy Scriptures. After all, this is the source of authority for his religion. This is the source of the Christian revelation. And the whole endeavor of evangelical religion, as I understand it, is to make that Christian revelation as contained in the Bible contemporary. This authority is, of course, typical of the many fundamentalist sects which will argue forever over the literal meaning of the individual words and phrases of Jesus. I'm certain you've had some encounters with them on your doorsteps, perhaps, and have discovered that no matter what they may propose to you, if they can find some piece of scripture which seems to support their view, then it's all settled. No amount of reasoning or common sense will shake them, because of course, they have touched upon their final authority. Running neck and neck with the Bible as a source of religious authority is the church hierarchy, and the church traditions. Naturally, this is particularly true with regards to the Roman Catholic and the Episcopal churches, though it applies to a lesser extent to many others as well. In part, this is the authority of tradition, of the old established methods of procedure and ways of thinking. Such elements as the creeds, the decisions of church councils, the rulings of popes and bishops, the liturgy, and standardized forms of worship of all kind. Such elements as these comprise the bulk of this mode of authority. But just behind the church's authority lies the right of interpretation. The Holy Scriptures are open to all, but the right to interpret these scriptures is retained by the church hierarchy, passed down from generation to generation of priests by apostolic succession. This exclusive right to interpret, retained as it is by the men of the church, becomes in the last analysis the final authority and the ultimate arbitrator in religion. All believers are expected to submit to and obey this authority. These are the two prime authorities in traditional Western religion, the Bible and the church. Intermingling with both, however, is a third, represented by the secular mores. The accepted attitudes and values held by the majority of each generation, the conventional ways of thinking, and the political and economic systems which currently exist. These tend to color and shape the two primary forms of religious authority. Actually, the secular mores have a far greater influence upon the traditional, conventional religion of an age than the churches would like to admit. I mention these three very ancient traditional sources of authority for a reason. One of the most decisive factors in any person's religious life is where he finds his own authority. That is, where does he turn when he is called upon to make a judgment, an independent decision in his living? How he answers this question of authority will determine the general configuration of his religious beliefs. It will delineate the boundaries of his freedom. It will indicate those directions in which his religious development may move, as well as determining those directions of development which are automatically closed. One characteristic of the free religious movement, a mark which has distinguished Unitarians and Universalists from all other Orthodox religious groups, has been its consistent and increasing shift away from all three of these forms of authority, with an increasing emphasis upon the individual and the importance of the individual's own personal religious encounter with life. More and more, we have come to appreciate the individual, which is a distinctive development of Western civilization. We have come to appreciate the inner creativeness of the individual, which allows him to grow and mature in spiritual stature, to grow in ways and directions which are uniquely his own. Within churches of our persuasion, authority rests upon the individual. It resides first and foremost in each man's own personal religious encounter. However, the prime problem of any free liberal religion is the same problem Martin Luther faced, the problem of religious anarchy. How do you keep from falling into the chaos of wishful thinking, the dream world where every man is a prophet of his own delusions, where every soul may claim final authority for any idiot fantasy and whim that rises to mind? There have been religious groups like this, you know, in Luther's day and in our own. And so often they tear themselves apart, destroying the church group and in some instances, the individuals within that group. Yet in almost 400 years that Unitarian churches have existed, this has not occurred. And why? Because we have tempered our individual authority with some disciplines. And disciplined authority is the only kind which may survive in the long run. One discipline we have is our communion with our fellow man. While we accept the solitary nature of our religious encounter, we recognize that full, deep understanding of that encounter may arise only out of communion with others. We recognize that religion has an important social dimension, a social dimension without which religion is incomplete, without which religion may become capricious and weak. We recognize that religious understanding arises from communion and communication and community with others, from the exchange of ideas and impressions, from the sharing of beliefs and experiences, from working and striving together to fulfill the highest we can envision. This communion of free, concerned individuals is one of the most powerful disciplines of our religion. Another is the discipline of knowledge, the discipline of intelligent, informed inquiry, and of demonstrated truths, the disciplines of logic and reason, and the work of sincere, dedicated men who have given their lifetimes to uncovering the facts and realities of our world. We accept this discipline of knowledge, yet without deluding ourselves that it represents any kind of an absolute authority. There is no absolute certainty in knowledge. It is all contingent and relative, constantly in flux. Thus, we temper our authority with the twin disciples of knowledge and communion with others, to the end that our religion may not become capricious and diluted. Individual acceptance of responsibility is what freedom means in religion. In order for a person to be free religiously, he must be willing to forego some of the advantages Orthodox religion offers. Because so long as a person accepts any external authority, be it the Bible, the church, the society, or the state, he has the advantage of shifting responsibility for his existence onto the shoulders of another. The free man must make his own decisions and abide by the consequences of those decisions. This church, like every other free liberal church, cannot offer you any final authoritarian answers to the problems of life. It may offer you as a free people many other things: communion and community with like-minded free souls, an opportunity and a meeting ground where you may probe your own faith and contemplate the ultimate questions of living and many other important aspects of the liberal church. But final answers? Never. If you require these, there are plenty of other churches just down the street offering just such absolute authoritarian beliefs. The first step a man must take in his religious quest is to settle for himself the question of religious authority, whether or not he is to seek some external authority, some protective umbrella to shield him from the storms of life. If he decides he can forego these, then he is ready to accept the inner authority of his own religious encounter with life and to temper it with the twin disciples of knowledge and communion with other free souls. Then it is that he begins the true adventure of religion. Then it is that he realizes that religion is an ongoing, progressive affair. Then it is that he knows that, in the words of Raymond J. Bauman, faith is not something we start with, but something at which we arrive. We find it in the midst of life, all along the way. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Special thanks to Sarah and to Liz for giving voice to the words in our archives. Thank you to Jerry for everything you have shared, and to John Perez for your time and your dedication as our tech host and our production guru. Our closing words today come from the recessional hymn, again from Reverend Richard Kelley's installation service. Where is our holy church? Where race and class unite as equal brothers in the search for beauty, truth, and right. Where is our holy man? A mighty host respond, for good men rise in every land. to break the captive's bond. Where is our holy writ? Where'er a human heart a sacred torch of truth has lit, by inspiration taught. Where is our holy land? Within the human soul, wherever strong men truly seek, with character the goal. Where is our paradise? In aspiration's sight, wherein we hope to see arise 10,000 years of light. Go in peace.